Hello and welcome to the first in a series of videos covering Chapter 6 of Government in America. This chapter covers public opinion and how the public takes political action. Uh, I'm thinking that this set of videos for this chapter will be about 3, but who knows, I could turn out to be wrong there. So let's get started with what the term public opinion refers to. Now, there's actually kind of two senses of the term. One way that people talk about public opinion is trying to figure out what's the total breakdown of what people in a given population think. How many of them like one idea versus how many people like another idea. So you might say public opinion is split because 55% like this and 45% like that. Or you might see people use the term public opinion just to talk about what a majority of the people are thinking or feeling. So you might see an article that talks about a politician being unpopular, saying public opinion has turned against Senator so-and-so because his approval rating is down to 40%. So 60% of the people don't like him. So you got to kind of be careful about exactly which sense of public opinion people are talking about. But in essence, what we're getting at here is public opinion is trying to figure out what does the population think as a whole. Now, one of the things that people who study public opinion in America have made note of over the last several decades is that the nature of America's population itself is changing. America today does not look the way America in 1990 or 1970 or 1950 looked. So the change in what sort of kind of population we have also plays out into changes into what we as a people believe. This is studied in more detail in the field of demographics, which is the study of different groups within a population. You might hear about demographic breakdowns, which try and look at different age groups or different genders or different races or ethnic groups. Any kind of way of breaking down a population, that's demographics. Now, the biggest tool that we have in the United States for studying demographics over a long period of time is the census. The Constitution requires that every 10 years the United States count the number of people who are in the United States because we need that in order to figure out how many members of the House of Representatives each state is going to get. So we need that count every 10 years. Well, the United States doesn't just go around and just do a head count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They do surveys to try and find out how old are people, where do they come from, what are their family structures like, what's their income. So we get all of this information every 10 years that we can study and kind of get a snapshot of what America is like. It's not perfect. It has its faults, like just about any tool does. It tends to miss some people, and the people that it misses tend to be people who they're poorer or they move around a lot. They don't have a fixed home address, things like that. So we can't look at the census and say it's 100% dead on. This is exactly how many people we have, but it gives us a good idea. Now, what have we noticed if we compare, 1970 to 1980 to 1990 and so on? Well, the nature of the American population is definitely changing. In the past, the vast majority of people in America have been from groups that are historically or traditionally considered white. Basically, sort of northern European type um, places. Oh, depending on maybe a little bit more of Europe, depending on exactly how flexible people are being with the definition. But that's who the bulk of the population has been. Obviously, there's always been a large African American minority within the country due to all of the um, African prisoners who were brought over to this country as slaves, and then also subsequent immigration. Um, and we have had immigration from Asia, from uh, Mexico, from South America, Central America, and other parts of the world. But up until recently, all of those groups have not added up to the same number as the people from uh, and the descendants of the people uh, from Europe. That is changing because um, number one, the uh, the Caucasian population in America uh, is not reproducing as fast. They're not having as many kids for a variety of reasons. There are a lot of studies about how um, sort of the nature of sort of family and child uh, having decisions has changed in a lot of parts of American culture over the last 20, 30, 40 years. Um, so you've got fewer children from the traditional majority population. Meanwhile, you have immigration, and you also have the uh, you know those same sort of patterns that have led Caucasian Americans to have fewer kids haven't really affected the other groups as much. So they're having more children. So the share of America's population that is not white basically has been growing over time. And as a result, a lot of people who study demographics estimate that in the next 20 to 40 years, we're going to get to a point where um, more than 50% of the population of the United States will not identify as white. Um, and so that's going to kind of lead to some changes in what the traditional power structures and sort of cultural structures have been in the United States. And in addition to all of these trends, it's also important to take note of the fact that um, you know these groups are not static; they're not walled off from each other. People from different groups are having children with each other, which again leads to changes in the way that people identify their ethnic heritage. And again, so you move away from people who are identifying themselves strictly as white. And so again, we're thinking that in the next 20 to 40 years, over 50% of the United States of America population is not going to identify as Caucasian. And that's definitely a shift from how America has looked in the past. Now, we're still trying to figure out exactly what these changes mean in terms of American politics, because they do raise issues that come up when we have elections, and they're also sort of affecting the way that people sort of identify themselves politically, and that's something that is going to be worth discussing when we get a clearer view of what the major political divides are in the United States at this time in 2016, which will probably be in a later chapter. But it is worth thinking about how different groups in America have different family structures because the family is one of the main ways that people pick up ideas and beliefs about politics. It's one of the major factors of political socialization, which is the way that we pick up our beliefs and our attitudes about how the government works, how it should work, who we agree with, who we disagree with, um, and that starts from a very early age. Maybe even before we're even consciously paying attention to politics, we might be picking up cues from the people around us about what we should believe about politics and the government. Um, the family is probably the biggest uh, influencer in terms of political socialization. If someone grows up in a family that all sort of clearly leans in one direction politically, there's a real good chance that the child or the young person is going to pick up those beliefs, and that's going to form a prism through which they look at things. Um, but the family isn't the only influence. People also pick up political beliefs through school. You have social studies and civics classes. You have patriotic traditions, all sorts of things that people pick up in school and informs their belief about politics. Um, the things that we read and watch and hear uh, around us in the media affect our beliefs about the political system. And anytime we have to participate and get involved in the political system, that influences what we're going to believe about it. So if you go to vote, if you have to go deal with getting a building permit, if you get involved in a court case or have jury duty, all of these are things that can affect your political beliefs and your political views. They're all parts of political socialization. So, uh, having talked about how we might come to our views, in the next video, we're going to talk about how public opinion pollsters try to identify and assess what people's beliefs about politics are. And we'll pick up from there. Until then, I leave you with these questions for further thought and discussion.